Home has a weekend with less arguments than you and I normally have. Here's Cuomo.
Hey, everybody, I'm Chris Cuomo. Thank you for joining me here on NewsNation. Happy Friday night. We are now less than 3 weeks from Election Day. Trump and Harris are basically tied, okay? Now, here's my food for thought on the state of the race. The polls. All of the respected polls have it really close, in the overall and in the states that matter. We really haven't seen a race this close, according to those measurements, in a long time, like 20 years. But I'm not as caught up in how close it is. I'm very caught up, and I really want to talk to you about why. Polling lost some of my confidence, okay? The Vegas odds are tight. At least the ones not being manipulated by rich Trumpers that are skewing the betting line. So we know it's tight. We know it's tight where it matters. We know it's tight overall. We know that that is a concern specifically for Democrats because they need a popular vote margin to usually trigger a sign of strength that they will eventually win the Electoral College. But let's put all that to the side. Why? Why is it so tight? Because we are in a battle to the bottom. Not just of which is worse, okay? But this two-party system could only have taken us here. This is the natural inclination, okay? You and I are not going to kill each other trying to be better than the other one when it's easier to win by just making the other guy lose, making him worse, making her worse. So that is human nature. That is what is easier. The negative is easier to motivate than the positive. That's why we spend so much time on self-help and positivity. That's why the Greeks gave us the word demagogue, someone who organizes on the basis of anger and outrage, but not a positive opposite. Okay, so we see it because it's easier, but this is where we were always going to wind up. Now is the interesting part of the analysis, okay? You're probably with me most of where I just went, right? Until this point. And people say, are you kidding? If this is a battle of which of these two is worse, Harris wins all day because we've never seen worse than Trump. We've never seen unpopularity in polling and in suggestions from culture and thought leaders as we have with Trump. So Harris has got to win. These people are missing the comparison at play. It is a little bit of a riddle almost, okay, of how does Trump get to say these things, even last night at the Al Smith dinner, and do these things and get away with it? No. This is not the same measure, Trump and Harris. Harris is not being measured against him, not by the people voting for him. She's being measured against the movement's objective, rejecting a system, its surrounding cultures, and those that manipulate those cultures for their benefit instead of the people who are voting to reject them. And that's what Trump is. He is the mascot. He is the agent of their animus. That is the answer to the riddle of, I don't get it. Why do they pick Trump when any Republican would give him almost all of the policies the same way? It's just how he said, because they want the animus. They want what he is saying and how he's saying it. They want that he is against you and it drives you crazy. That's why this race is so close. The proposition is of, keep telling you, enragement versus engagement. People who are enraged by the system, the culture, the radical nature of redefining mores and societal values. That's transgender sports. That is a perverse twisting of the reality there and in many LGBTQ plus issues. That's what's being rejected. So Harris doesn't win because she's better than Trump. She has to find a way to either put together a coalition that is bigger than the one that wants to reject the norms, which I got to tell you is very seductive, right? How many people you know, other than Harris, are forced or comfortable saying everything's great? I mean, we can make things better, but everything's great, right? She has to say that because she's in the sitting administration. The incumbency effect is usually a positive unless you're in a grievance election. Think 1976. So for Harris to beat that, it's not just being better than Trump. It's the wrong metric. It's about finding a way to overcome not him, but the object of the movement, which is their rejection of exactly where she works and her life trajectory. That's what's at play. That's what has us divided, whether to be enraged or to engage and figure a way to deal with the problems that are enraging us. This is much harder than enragement. That's why it's so close, even though Trump is so unpopular. The question is, which one of these motivations, enragement or engagement, will win out? And that will be the answer to who wins this election. We're getting very close. Donald Trump is speaking on our watch. He's in Detroit. What is his message going to be? I gotta give you a dime, or you win 8 cents, that he's going to be bashing Harris most of the time. Harris is speaking on our watch. She's in Oakland County, Michigan. What do you think she's going to be doing? I guarantee it ain't going to be good for Trump. The question is, which tactic that's being employed here at the end stands a better chance of winning? I'll give Harris this much. She's a lot more active than Trump in trying to expand her base. And that could be a very big deal. Now, to kind of set the table of where we are, Donald Trump was in New York City for that Al Smith dinner I was telling you about, right? It's a famous thing. Harris didn't show. It bothers the insiders, but you probably don't even know why I'm mentioning it. Okay. Since 1960, though, this event has been a real showcase for both parties, okay, to court the Catholic vote. I mean, that's, Al Smith was a big Catholic. That is nominally what it is. Cardinal Dolan was there. But really now it's just a political night for them to just kind of show the state of play between the two. Last night, Trump arguably took it to a whole new level, especially when he went in on New York City's former mayor, Bill de Blasio. Here's a taste.
We have another former New York City mayor with us, frankly, easily the worst in our history. I'm surprised that Bill de Blasio was actually able to make it tonight, to be honest. He was a terrible mayor. I don't give a shit if this is comedy or not. He was a terrible mayor. He did a horrible job. That's not comedy, by the way, that's fact. But unlike the rest of New York, at least Bill doesn't have to worry about the criminals. They owe him big. He let them get away with a lot of stuff.
Okay, now, forget about the truth of the matter asserted. The thing to look at that goes back to what I was talking about before, the faces of the people around him, okay? The faces of the people around him, Republican or Democrat, they reject his tone. They reject that demeanor. They reject that kind of ad hominem, the attack on a person. But that's because they're part of a culture, arguably a system of fugazi decorum with one another that many people are rejecting. And as ugly as Trump may come across with his comments, it is a rejection of what they hate more than Trump's behavior. You got to know the psychology to understand the pragmatism of the process we're in. Now, the object of Trump's affection was the former mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, okay? I asked him to come on, and when I say I, of course, I meant Dusty, because I know Bill. I grew up around the mayor. I've literally known him almost all of my life. He's always been much taller than me, but I was much more shorter when we met. He is now, you see the mayor on the screen, is in Michigan campaigning for Harris, so I really appreciate it. It's like a twofer. And I'll be honest, I wanted to give you a chance to use the audience to go back at what he was saying and what you think he represents in this race.
Chris, we have known each other forever. And, your analysis, I was listening to it. I see a lot in what you're saying, but I also think you're talking about a dinner for the Archdiocese of New York, for charity for children, a place that is supposed to be about Christian values. And for all those years when both candidates showed up, in fact, most candidates did an incredible job of making fun of themselves and giving us a sense it doesn't always have to be vicious. It can be some respect. And Donald Trump is the only one in history who doesn't understand that. So I hear your point. If he's fighting the system, he's the rebel. I get that. And I think there's a lot of things broken with our status quo. But I'll tell you what I don't accept. You don't go into a Christian event and curse and swear and talk negatively about a number of people. He can say whatever he wants about me. I'm used to it. I'm a New Yorker. I can take it. But who does that? If we're trying to set a tone in this country where maybe
he does not want to set that tone. He does not want to set that tone, Bill.
He doesn't.
You want to set that tone.
No,
he does not want to set that tone because his voters don't want him to set that tone.
But, Chris, I'm going to argue this point, and I bet you might agree with me.
Please.
The everyday American, I've been crisscrossing this country for years, the everyday American does not want conflict. They want to get along with their neighbor. They want to go to Little League. They want to, be involved in their community. They go to their house of worship. They don't have to love each other, agree on everything, but they want to get along. And it's no surprise that Donald Trump has lost the popular vote overwhelmingly twice. And I think it's about to happen again. So, again, I'm never surprised by anything he does. But what I want to say to you is, I think he went into a place where he had a chance for once to show some respect to the people around him. It's just not who he is. It's not something he'll ever do.
Yeah, you just answered your own question. I mean, look, Bill, if it were you who had done it, I would come at you like ugly on an ape, mainly because I just respect where we're both from and how I know you are capable of being. So I would have attacked you because I know you know better and you believe in better, right? I mean, you were raised Catholic, So he doesn't. He doesn't give a damn about Catholics, and he knows what gets him what he is. And by the way, he's one of the luckiest guys in the history of the game that either of us have seen. Every one of his personal flaws works for what he's trying to do right now, which is to basically be the raging agent of people's discontent with legitimate things. And that's not easy for Harris to overcome.
Here's where your analysis in the beginning, I think, was really insightful. And I've been saying to a lot of people, pay attention to why people are pissed off about the status quo in this country, because they have a right to be pissed off. But I'll tell you something else. This election will be decided by women. And talk about pissed off, and I see this all over Michigan. Women just had their rights taken away. And by the way, talk to Republican women. You'd be shocked, Chris, how many Republican women, how many independent women normally wouldn't think in a million years of voting for a Democrat. But they're pissed off at the status quo where something was taken from them, and they're angry at the guy who did it. And they vote.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most powerful issues I've seen.
It's incredibly personal, emotional, powerful. It is about your basic rights. First time in American history, a basic right has been taken away. So where Kamala Harris is tonight, Oakland County, one of the big swing counties in this entire nation, those suburban women, I've talked to a lot of them, they are going to shock you with how many of them are going to come over to her. And Donald Trump's shtick actually keeps turning them off. So agree with a lot of your analysis, except for in this moment in history, he keeps putting salt in that wound by the very way he acts.
I know. But the question is, are people more, I'm trying to get the metaphor right, are they more interested in healing this wound or allowing the infection to spread so that the limb that they don't want anymore rots and falls off? I mean, that is a very crude representation. Now, is it enough people? No. But unfortunately, it's not about just the simple popular vote as it is in every other country. It's about concentrations of people in different states. That's why your candidate, the vice president, is in Oakland County, Michigan. Correct. It has gotten that well examined. So I'll tell you what I'll do as a twofer. I thank you for coming on, and I'm going to open up the microphone to your candidate who's speaking right now so that the audience can hear what she's saying.
Amen. Take care, Chris.
A little warm.
Okay.
Let's just make sure we're looking out for each other, okay?
Lots of folks.
Okay. Are we okay? Okay. All right. It looks like we're good. We're okay? All right. Okay. Thank you. And always to our first responders, thank you for your work. So as I was saying, our Arab American community has deep and proud roots in the Detroit metro area, and I am very proud to have the support of Arab American leaders like Wayne County Deputy Executive Assad Turfi, and listen, I know this year has been very difficult, given the scale of death and destruction in Gaza, and given the civilian casualties and displacement in Lebanon. It is devastating, and now Sinwar's death can and must be a turning point. Everyone must seize this opportunity to finally end the war in Gaza, bring the hostages home, and end the suffering once and for all. And I continue to believe diplomacy is the answer to bringing lasting stability across the Israel-Lebanon border. And as Vice President, and with your help as President, I will do everything in my power to achieve these goals and work toward a future with security and dignity for all people in the region. So thank you all. And Michigan, listen, we got 18 days to get this done. 18 short days. And you all wouldn't be here spending your
this is the question. You listen to the Vice President. Do you hear someone who understands the job, understands the necessary compromises, has an ambition of an optimism to work within that system and get it done? Or do you hear somebody who is a function of a way of speaking and a nonchalance and an inside game that you think needs to be destroyed? I mean, that is what's driving the division. And look, Mayor de Blasio was right. There are more people in the country who reject that kind of extremism, but where and in what percentages? Because that's what decides this election. And that's why it's so close. 4 minutes and 5 seconds, all right? Donald Trump has been walking around a stage pissed off because his microphone wasn't working. I mean, you cannot make any of this up. And you know what? I can't believe you people haven't started the conspiracy yet that the Democrats, that Biden cut a cord somewhere. Anyway, his mic is fixed. Let's go to break. When we come out, we're going to let you hear what he's saying. But also, with less than 2 hours before an execution by lethal injection, a man was convicted he was convicted of shaken baby syndrome. His life was spared for now, and in a way I've never seen before in 25 years of doing this job. And also, the Delphi trial. Day one, gruesome, double killings, okay? The Delphi murder case. The judge allowed for the jury, and now for you, to understand exactly how the two teenage girls brutally lost their lives. We'll share it and what it means after this. Trump threw to a video, so they came back to me because he's not speaking. And when he gets back in there and he starts giving the thrust of it, Dusty will get in my ear and I will get in your face and I'll bring it to you. Okay? And we know why both candidates are addressing crowds in Michigan. She's got to win Michigan. It's going to be tight. And she has two problems. She has the economy, pocketbook economy, and she has a pocket issue for her party, which is divided sympathies and loyalties in the Middle East. And Arab voters, some of them are going to be far left on that issue. And that's a tough fit for Harris. I know she's the incumbent, but I really believe, as unpopular as Trump is, she has the tougher task to win this. I think it is Trump's race to lose. Not for good reason, not for bad reason, and not for no reason. It's because of the dynamic overall. So, listen to this story, all right? We have two big crime stories to unpack. Death sentence, lethal injection, killed a baby, by shaking it. 2 hours before the injection, 57-year-old Robert Roberson, first person scheduled to be put to death for shaken baby syndrome, right? That's, you shake it, you cause such a bad brain injury by the shaking that you kill the kid. But now, a temporary stay of execution by a Texas judge, the likes of which I've never heard before. The death was his 2-year-old daughter, by the way, Nikki. He's been 20 years plus in prison on death row. He's always said, no, I didn't do that. That was not the way it was. She was sick. She fell out of bed, and he found her there, dead. The Innocence Project has campaigned against the execution, as did lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. Think about that. Joining me now is Vanessa Potkin. She's the director of special litigation for the Innocence Project. I'm a big fan of the work that you guys do, but in this novel, let's say, mechanism of getting this to happen, you have an unusual ally, which is a good chunk of the prosecution, Vanessa. So explain to people what is going on here and why it's proving so difficult despite this unusual joint purpose by both sides.
Yeah, it's quite incredible. So Texas was a leader in the nation in terms of passing what's called a junk science writ. So they passed a law 11073 to deal with the fact that sometimes people are convicted based on science. And then after the trial, it turns out that science evolves and we learn that the evidence they were convicted on has since been discredited. So Texas was a leader in passing a law for people like that, people like Robert, to get back into court. Unfortunately, it didn't provide the pathway that it should have for him. When Robert's daughter, Nikki, died, at the time, it was believed that if you saw this triad of conditions, if you saw retinal hemorrhaging and more or less bleeding and swelling in the brain, you could presume that there was abuse. You didn't need to look any further into what happened. And since that time, we've come to learn, no, you have to look further because illness, like Nikki had, can cause those same conditions.
Now, tell people in layman's terms, you have exhausted the criminal appeals. You went civil here, basically subpoenaing in a civil action the defendant so that you can't kill him because I need him, and that there's a colorable action here. Tell me about that.
What's, so unprecedented, as you mentioned at the beginning, is that over 80 lawmakers in the Texas House of Representatives, this is Republicans and Democrats, came together initially to say, we have concerns about Robert Roberson's case. We think this is an innocent person. The execution can't go forward. And the courts refused to provide relief, even though there's this law that was created exactly for people like Robert. And so what happened earlier this week is that the Texas House Committee on Criminal Jurisprudence started having hearings. They said, look, if this law isn't working for Robert, then we need to examine whether we need to make amendments. What do we need to do to fix the law? Maybe we need a new law. They started having hearings. And when it was clear that the courts weren't going to give relief, they issued a subpoena. So this came from the House of Representatives, a subpoena for Robert to testify on Monday. So we've never seen this before. You can't go forward with the execution because we need him as a witness to testify before a House committee on criminal justice. And that's where he'll be on Monday. He was minutes away from being executed. It actually passed the time of his execution, and we were just, waiting to see what the courts were going to do last night. And of course, that was halted. And on Monday, he's going to be testifying before this committee that's examining whether changes to the law need to be made so that he can ultimately get relief.
And the question, of course, becomes for how long? And we'll keep following it. Vanessa, thank you very much for explaining your side of the case and your position on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right. So we're going to consider that case and where the law is and what the likelihood is. But there's another case also a murder case. Headlines: Day one of the Delphi murders trial. Now, this is back in 2017. It rocked this small town in Indiana. Baffled local police, really up until almost today. two teenage girls, 13-year-old Abigail Williams, 14-year-old Liberty German. They're hiking. Okay, you remember this one? A few hours later, they're found brutally murdered. Okay, both girls' throats slit. Libby naked, bloodied. Her best friend Abby's clothes found on top of her. Intense, bizarre scene. High intentionality. Took local cops more than 5 years to make an arrest. So then comes 2022. 52-year-old Richard Allen lived in the small town of Delphi, worked as a pharmacy tech, arrested, charged with the 2 counts of murder and 2 additional counts of murder while committing or attempting to commit kidnapping. That's called a felony murder. Okay, you're trying to do something that is a high felony. You wind up killing people. It is a combination crime. Joining me now, attorneys Misty Maris and Randy Zellin. It's good to have you both. Thank you, especially on a Friday. From the prosecution perspective, who's going to give me that? Is that Randy or Misty? Who's giving me the prosecution?
That's me. That's me tonight, Chris.
All right. Thankfully. So, Randy, from the prosecution perspective on this, first, one case at a time. I want to talk Delphi, but I want to get your quick take. Do you think Roberson is going to wind up being able to live because the lawmakers and the prosecution and the defense all want the same thing to happen? Or do you think they're going to kill him?
They got to keep him alive. Talk about, could you have a better example of reasonable doubt, needing more information? My God, it shows us a trial is not the search for the truth. It is your version of enragement versus engagement.
Misty, why would the courts be pushing back on this when, nobody wants them to?
Well, there are some prosecutors and some medical advocates have said that this was a valid medical theory and still remains to be. And really what we have here is every other court has rejected his plea for clemency. So it was rejected by the Supreme Court of the United States, the highest criminal court in Texas, the parole board. And so really all of his appeals have been exhausted. But this is really this is like legal maneuvering more than we've ever really seen on this type of issue. So it's a really interesting case to follow.
It's really unprecedented to have the legislature step in.
Yeah, I think he's going to wind up being lucky he's in Texas. I think he's going to wind up being lucky he's in Texas because the judges are going to want to not piss off both sides of the state house there. It's a different dynamic. All right, quick. Delphi, Misty, on the defense side of that one, do they have a shot of shooting down the case on basically a process issue, or do you think that this is a tough haul for the defense because they got the right guy?
Look, it's a real tough haul for the defense, mainly because he confessed behind bars 60 plus times. That's a really difficult hurdle to overcome. But from the defense perspective, think about the timeline of this case. 2017, an arrest isn't made until 2022. They're really going after the investigation, and there were a lot of bumps in that. They're also challenging the timeline. And keep in mind, there's something happening in the background that the defense alluded to today in their opening statement, and that's that one of the girls was communicating with an individual who's now deceased, but was a convicted pedophile, and that he was a suspect at one point. So I have a feeling you're going to see the defense really focusing on this is another individual who could have committed this crime that isn't here today, and therefore there's reasonable doubt. That's where the defense is going on this one.
And the strong counter on the other side, Randy, quickly, is he was there.
Well, not only was he there, but there was a bullet found, and apparently that bullet is linked to a gun that was seized from his home. So that's going to be an extraordinarily difficult thing for the defense. The defense has to focus in on, my God, talk about luck. Are you telling me the guy woke up this morning, I'm going to go kill people. I load up my gun, my knives, and I happen to find 2 girls, and I kill them with a knife. There is reasonable doubt built into this case if they can get around the bullet.
Misty, Randy, thank you both very much. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, 4.5 minutes. When we come back, I wanted to get you the former CDC head, Dr. Robert Redfield. Now, as you know, I've had him on the show before. I've had him on my podcast. I hold him in very high regard. Why is he signing up to be a member of the Trump administration again with Bobby Kennedy Jr. Why is he doing this? What does he think can happen? And I want you to measure his level of confidence. Dr. Redfield, next. The answer to the question of why CDC director, former director, Dr. Robert Redfield, is willing to go back into Trump land is really interesting to me. Now, remember, during the pandemic, Redfield was, of course, in charge of the CDC. He called for us to be confident in the new vaccines. He said it was key for people to get it. Remember this?
It's going to be a game changer as our nation embraces vaccine, but they got to embrace vaccine with confidence. I will say it's one of my greatest priorities right now as CDC director to continue at this moment in time to try to help move more and more of the public to vaccinate with confidence.
So the question becomes, how does he team up with someone who was saying the exact opposite at the time? Bobby Kennedy Jr. Here's what he's had to say about the vaccine in 2021.
If you take the vaccine, you're 48% more likely to die of all causes. If you take the vaccine, you're 500% more likely to have a heart attack that kills you over the next 6 months. And for every one life they save from COVID, they're killing 4 people from the vaccine. It confirms that this is the deadliest vaccine ever made.
Now, people dismissed that analysis, that he was spinning it to create a poison point that now, as we all know, he's backed away from. He's about transparency, not anti-vaccine. He just wants safe vaccines. But still, what is important enough to get Redfield back into this group and with Bobby Kennedy Jr. in particular? Okay? The answer is MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. It is not a slogan for these guys. They believe this could be a moonshot that will change 1 or 2 generations of kids' realities. Let's bring in Dr. Redfield right now. It's good to see you, Bob, as always. Thank you for being with me.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Glad to be here.
So let's deal with the past, and then we'll get to the present. Why do you have a level of confidence that you can work with Bobby and be part of Trump land and get anything done?
Well, I think you set it up. You know, the real issue for me is the opportunity to transform our health system, which right now is a disease system, to a health system to try to make America healthy again. We lost over 1 million people from COVID. And the reason we did is we're a very unhealthy nation right now. Probably more than 40% of our nation has obesity or prediabetes or hypertension. And it really is time to focus on health, which the target is to go after chronic disease and more effectively manage it on the one end, and on the earlier end, really put a variety of preventive steps in to try to prevent chronic disease. And I think Kennedy is really passionate about this, about making America healthy again. And I think Kennedy finally deciding to partner with President Trump is an opportunity to really develop, you know, you use the term, and I agree with it. I think it's a moonshot opportunity to change our focus in healthcare from disease to health and health.
Unpack a 2-part question for me then. What gives you the confidence that Trump can marshal the discipline, the consistency, and the political skill to have an all-government initiative for you guys at home? That means every agency that has anything to do with children, health, the supply chain that goes into it, the clinical side, the regulations of those, all of it has to work together in this ambition. It's why Biden's idea of getting rid of cancer, it hasn't really wowed us in terms of its ability to do anything. It's a very hard task. And Trump's guys want to cut the CDC because they want to close the footprint of government. So how do you get a sense of confidence when you need so much and they want to cut what you have?
Well, there's no doubt in order for this to happen, we need to have a very strong and robust and actually a very expanded capacity at an agency like CDC. My own view is that that Kennedy is really extremely passionate about this in particular. And I think, I reflect back on his uncle in 1962 when he said that we were going to have a man on the moon by the end of the decade. And of course, when he said that, we had no idea how to do that. We didn't have the science how to do it. Right. And we didn't have political will how to do it. But somehow Kennedy saw that vision, and as I always said, saw the possible and then led our nation to act. And by 1969, we put a man on the moon. I think we're at the same stage for those of us that really believe that making America healthy again is possible. And I think Kennedy's passion on this issue right now, combined with, I think, a commitment from the president when they've gotten together, this is a real opportunity. America, as I say, lost over 1 million people, from COVID, and you had other countries like Taiwan that lost less than 5,000 people. What was the difference is that we're just a sick nation, and it's time for our children. And I have 14 grandchildren now. It's time for our children, and it's time for even those of us that are older. We really have to turn around what the major impact of our health system right now, which is this enormous epidemic we have of chronic disease. And I just think it's very believable. I'm in my 70s now. I probably got another 10 or 15 years of productive life as a doctor. I'd like to finally see us change the focus to health. And that's why I teamed up with Kennedy, because I think he's passionate about, he believes in this. And the most important thing about him and this issue is he believes it can be done. If you don't believe it can be done, we should stay on the sidelines.
I hear you, and I love the ambition. I appreciate your passion for purpose. And the question is, of course, how? And how do you avoid the problem? I'm passionate about football. It wouldn't let me run the Jets. Passion isn't enough. So you got to figure out the other pieces. Doctor, we'll keep talking about it, okay? If Trump wins and this becomes a real thing, you're welcome here on a regular basis to discuss the details and the needs, okay?
Well, I appreciate your support, because it really is something that's extremely important to focus on chronic disease and to learn how to make America healthy again.
I'm with you. Thank you, Dr. Redfield. Appreciate it. 3 minutes and 45 seconds. So, Middle East matters. Ukraine matters. Why is North Korea sending soldiers to train with Russians? Are they going to put North Koreans on the field against Ukraine? Now, what does the U.S. do? They have a weapon that will make all the difference, has been making all the difference. There's a level of commitment that's needed. The man who's coming knows the region and is making the case of what has to happen next. Intel from South Korea suggests North Korea has sent 1,500 special forces troops and weapons to Russia to help their war against Ukraine. North Korea, as you may know, has like the fourth largest military, over 1 million personnel. Zelensky says if the reports are true, this would be a world war. What is the state of play? What does it mean for America? And something America can do that is making a big difference already, and they need to do it more. Why? Dan Rice will explain. The president of the American University in Kyiv, former special advisor to the Ukrainian commander-in-chief. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you.
Thank you for giving me the heads up that it is time to check in. What is the state of play? What does the North Korea move mean?
This is a very frightening time, Chris. North Korea entering the war is a very scary predicament for several reasons. One, Putin is running out of troops. He's already euthanized his prison population. Over 700,000 Russians have been killed or wounded. He decided on a war of attrition, and the Ukrainian armed forces are destroying his army. He's running out of troops. He doesn't want to go to mass mobilization, so he went to his friend Kim Jong-un, and North Korea is now apparently supplying troops. And Ukraine has already killed some in Ukraine. So in a crazy world, there are North Korean troops inside Ukraine fighting for Russia. It is becoming a world war.
What does it mean for us?
The U.S. needs to continue to work with NATO to fight the aggressors. The aggressor countries are clearly North Korea, Iran, and Russia that are coming together. And let's not forget China. China is a part of this. North Korea is beholden to China. 97% of all its food and fuel comes from China. Kim Jong-un would not be in Ukraine had it not been for Xi Jinping's approval. Xi Jinping actually operated with Putin on the invasion and asked Putin to delay it until after the Olympics in 2022, when the Olympics were in Beijing. So this is becoming a world war supported by China, supporting Russia to attack the Ukrainian people and basically genocide, supported by the two state sponsors of terror, which is Iran and North Korea. North Korea is now sending troops. North Korea has one of the largest armies in the world, over 1 million men under arms, and they're now operating in Ukraine, and Ukraine needs to destroy not only Russian troops now, but also North Korean, and we need to support them with everything we have.
So on the category of the last part, that everything we have, you sent me a note saying, hey, we got to talk. I got to explain this cluster munitions and why they're working so well and what needs to be done there. But then I also want you to unpack the political situation, Dan, because it seems like the military fix is easy in terms of how the U.S. can help. But this is not a situation that there's any will to tolerate in the American government or its population.
Well, Chris, the whole solution and the whole defense of Western Europe has always been based on cluster munitions. Any freedom-loving people should love cluster munitions. I love cluster munitions. They're the best way to kill Russians in large scale. And that's what we fought to get for Ukraine, and we did get them. And the President of the United States and a bipartisan group from left and right supported cluster munitions, first for artillery howitzers, then for HIMARS launchers, and then for F-16 joint standoff bombs. Now we are supplying Ukraine with the right munitions, the ones we should have been supplying right at the beginning. Now we're supplying the right ones. Now we need to go in quantity. Quantity has its own quality. When you're going against mass armies of Russia and North Korea, you're talking about the only army in Europe that could have defended itself against the Russian army, Ukraine, and now it's having to fight the North Koreans. We need to supply Ukraine with everything we have, especially cluster munitions. If we give enough cluster munitions, they will destroy both the Russian army and the North Korean army in Ukraine.
Quickly, is that a risk of escalation? You know, we've discussed, you say it's legal here, but a lot of people think it's not legal. Will it be seen as an escalating move at the last moment that America needs that?
Not at all, Chris. We've already crossed the threshold of cluster munitions, and we've been supplying them. We started supplying them July 7th, 2023 for artillery, and then in October, I worked with Senator Reid to get those, the HIMARS launchers. So we have been supplying them. This is not anything new. This is not a escalation. This is just quantity, and that really is all we need to do. We need to do many things, obviously. We need to supply all kinds of electronic warfare, all kinds of Patriot missiles. There's a lot of this. This is a total war short of nuclear war. But the big killer of Russians, over 700,000 Russians have been killed or wounded. Over 50% of those, my sources tell me in the Department of Defense, have been caused by cluster munitions. One weapon system has destroyed the Russian army. It's cluster munitions. So every American should love cluster munitions defending Ukraine, and every American should ask for more cluster munitions to destroy the Russian army.
Dan Rice, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
Appreciate you.
Great to see you.
Continue.
Thank you, sir.
All right, we'll be right back.